Okay, let's dive right into this. Can we genuinely, truly bury our deepest desires? I mean, think about it. Do the thoughts and feelings that we try so hard to push into the dark just vanish, or do they inevitably claw their way back to the surface? You know, it's a question that has literally puzzled philosophers, psychologists, and, well, everyday people like us for centuries. Today, we're exploring a deeply fascinating and, honestly, a heavily misunderstood aspect of human psychology.
Welcome to this explainer on the psychological impact of sexual repression. We're going to completely demystify what actually happens when the human mind tries to suppress one of its most fundamental hardwired drives. We're going to look under the hood at the cognitive mechanisms behind it and explore the profound and sometimes really surprising impacts it has on both the mind and the body.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the origins of repression, then look at exactly how the mind represses, the emotional and physical toll it takes, the return of the repressed, and finally, overcoming sexual repression.
All right, Section 1, the origins of repression.
Just to make absolutely sure we're all on the same page here, let's define our terms. According to clinical consensus, sexual repression is the conscious or unconscious suppression of sexual desires, thoughts, behaviors, or expressions. Now, a quick caveat. This is not the same thing as choosing to abstain from sex or being asexual, where there's simply little to no sexual attraction to begin with. Repression is an active mechanism. It's an internal blocking of an innate drive, and it very often stems from cultural norms, strict religious beliefs, or even traumatic experiences. So historically, we can trace this whole concept back to the philosopher Michel Foucault. He described what he called the repressive hypothesis. He noted that back in the Victorian era, essentially all discourse on sexuality was strictly stifled and silenced. It was totally taboo. Then by the 1890s, Sigmund Freud introduced his clinical theories, and he framed repression as a defensive inhibition of quote-unquote unbearable mental contents. Fast forward to today, modern clinical psychology often views this through the lens of cognitive avoidance. Basically, it's how our brains actively avoid thinking about threatening or uncomfortable information. Moving on to Section 2, how the mind represses. Psychologist Matthew Huor-Leard proposed this really interesting idea called the unified theory of repression, and he basically divided it into two main subclasses. First, you've got inhibitory repression. This is essentially subtractive. It's cognitive avoidance, intentional suppression, basically not thinking about a target memory or desire to the point where you actually forget it. Alternatively, there is elaborative repression, and this one is additive. Instead of just avoiding the thought, the mind distorts the truth through denial, or it adds noise, things like projection and rationalization, just to camouflage that unbearable desire. I absolutely love this quote from Erdely. He says, "Just as a fig leaf is not plastered randomly on the body of a censored nude, defensive repression may be deployed in a nuanced, meaningfully structured way." It's such a brilliant analogy, right? The mind doesn't just randomly forget things, it strategically covers up exactly what it finds unbearable. It's a highly structured defense mechanism.
Which brings us to Section 3, the emotional and physical toll.
Now, what's truly fascinating, and honestly, a bit alarming, is how repression manifests physically. It is definitely not just in your head. Emotionally, sexual repression leads to pervasive shame, intense guilt, and severe anxiety. But physically, it triggers profound somatic symptoms. This hyperarousal of the nervous system can cause real physical distress. People often describe it as this sensation of internal heat or a constant buzzing nervous tension. Furthermore, prolonged repression creates deep psychological barriers that directly cause sexual dysfunction. We're talking things like erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, and difficulty reaching orgasm. The body is literally manifesting the mind's hidden conflicts.
Okay, Section 4, the return of the repressed.
In researcher Jennifer Freud's two-dimensional model of traumatic events, traumas are mapped out by fear on one axis and social betrayal on the other. And here's the kicker. When an event involves high social betrayal, like, say, abuse by a caregiver, the mind often heavily relies on repression, resulting in total unawareness. The repression actually serves a purpose here. It protects a necessary, dependent relationship. It's an adaptive survival mechanism in the heat of the moment, leading to what Freud powerfully calls betrayal blindness.
And this brilliantly illustrates the data behind that theory, and it is striking. When we look at average memory impairment across different types of abuse, there is a massive, unmistakable spike for sexual abuse committed by a caretaker. The memory impairment is drastically higher than for non-caretaker abuse. The mind actively suppresses the memory just to survive that high betrayal environment, which often leads to severe behavioral withdrawal. But how does that suppressed memory or desire eventually come back? Well, it generally follows these 3 steps. Step 1 is conscious suppression. Basically, you're just trying your absolute hardest to forget it. Step 2 is fixation. This is where the mind builds unconscious defenses to distort reality, and it very often results in deep behavioral cynicism and a massive withdrawal from relationships. Finally, step 3 is the rebound. As our cognitive resources deplete over time or as specific triggers arise, the repressed material forces its way back. It returns through intrusive thoughts, physiological hyperarousal, or those highly symbolic, vivid dreams.
As Sigmund Freud observed over a century ago, reactivated memories never re-emerge into consciousness unchanged. They take the place of pathogenic memories as structures in the nature of a compromise. So what does that actually mean for us? It means that when a repressed sexual desire or a trauma returns, it doesn't always look like the original thought. It comes back wearing a disguise. It might show up as a phobia, a new physical symptom, an intrusive thought, or a seemingly unrelated anxiety. It's basically a compromise between the desire to express the thought and the defense mechanism that's desperately trying to hide it.
Now for our final section, Section 5, Overcoming Sexual Repression.
So the absolutely crucial point here is how we go about reclaiming our authenticity. Healing from sexual repression requires breaking that vicious cycle of shame. It really starts with self-exploration and education, taking the time to learn about healthy sexual practices to challenge those deeply internalized beliefs. Open, honest communication with trusted partners is absolutely vital to dissolving secrecy. Also, seeking professional therapeutic support can help unravel those complex cognitive defenses we talked about earlier. And finally, practicing self-care, mindfulness, and creative expression allows those buried feelings to surface safely, which helps reduce that somatic internal heat and anxiety.
I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to ponder. We've seen just how powerfully the mind can hide our truest drives to protect us from social betrayal and internal conflict. So, ask yourself, are your deepest beliefs about your own boundaries, your desires, and your identity truly yours? Or are they just a strategically placed fig leaf, hiding a much more complex and, quite frankly, beautiful reality? Thank you so much for exploring the mind with me today.